And thank you so much for taking time from your schedule to be here with us. Firstly, I'd like to ask you, what is it that inspired you to start writing poetry?
I think, I started writing when I was a teenager, and those are the years when you have so much angst within you. And I started writing because it had a cathartic, therapeutic effect. And I was inspired by many things, life, love, loss, so many things that were going around me.
Nejoud, when did you decide to start with poetry, and what is the thing that really influenced you and made you say, that's it, that's what I want to do, that's what I want to feed on a hobby, if you had, let's say?
It was a decision that came from within me, and I felt it was more of a necessity than actually something that I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. It's something that had to come out. It had to flow through me.
Is there a certain time that you started?
Like,
is it childhood?
Yeah, when I was in high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you have a lot of people around you who were into writing poetry, or was it just something you decided to do out of the blue?
Well, my father used to write poetry.
Okay.
He used to write poetry in Arabic. And we had that artistic environment growing up. You know, my parents both painted, and my father was really, he always encouraged us to read. And I think reading also, it mentally stimulates you and it gets you interested in things. But poetry is not something that came to me by choice. It was, like I said, it was something that I had to do.
Okay, you are in a very important part of your life, a phase of your poetry writing, because you just published a book about your poetry. It's your debut book, basically.
Yes.
I want to know more about this book.
Okay, well, basically it's 58 poems that I wrote, and they span 20 years of my life. And this year I decided to have responses from an elevated perspective, because I was going through a period of spiritual awakening, and I also lost someone very special to me. He died of cancer earlier this year, and so I guess I needed, there was more like of an urgency, you know, to express myself, and it just came as a result of that. And so the book is just the dichotomy of light and darkness that we have within us, and the loss and transcending that loss.
So we were talking before going on air how important it is for us to accept a lot of things that happen to us. Sometimes, you know, we face things that shock us. And you were saying how important it is for us to accept these things and let things flow. Let me know how you transcend that into your poetry, because it does flow to me. I've had the chance to read a couple of verses and watch the video that you made, but how do you interpret that, and how do you integrate that into your poetry?
It's something that flows through me. It's sometimes you have this pain that needs to come out, and it manifests itself in writing. So I feel fortunate and blessed that I can do that. But then there are many ways to express yourself, and poetry is my form, my way of doing things, you know, of writing and of transcending the pain.
And is there a particular setting you prefer to write your poetry in, or does it just randomly come to you?
Sometimes it's random, and most of the time it's in the seclusion of my room. Mm-hmm. That's when I write most of my poems.
There's a lot of people, Nejoud, that have saw the video that you did. We'll talk about that later, but for now, perhaps I'm also one of them. What if I'm have been inspired by what you wrote, and I like the idea? What kind of advice do you have for these people? Do you want to see more poets in Kuwait, let's say?
I want to see more people manifesting their creativity, whatever form it comes in, whether it's art or writing or cooking or whatever it is. Everyone has something that they do. So I wouldn't necessarily encourage someone to write poetry per se, but I would encourage them to be creative and see what passion that they have within them. And that comes from knowing themselves and knowing what comes easily. So definitely. It gives you a buzz when you're around creative people.
That's true. And Tori, should we get into the exciting part? Well, I mean, everything you're saying is really, really exciting, but we are in the film industry, and I'm interested to know how about you went and did the video. It's very simple. I like the simplicity of it. Who did you collaborate with? Why is it important for you to, you know, you kind of took initiative and more steps into not only being a poet, you're trying to be in, let's say, the media as well, different kinds of medias. So how is that like to make a video, a couple of videos? Was it what kind of experience was it?
Well, it was an adventure. I collaborated with a young filmmaker. His name is Hussein Ashimari, aka Slash. And it was really easy, actually, because he's really good at directing and producing, and he read my poetry and he understood what kind of message I was trying to get across. It was a spiritual and humanitarian message, and so we incorporated symbolism and imagery in the videos. And he came up with the brilliant idea of when we speak of the poems on the frequency of the ego, it would be in black and white, and I'm walking backwards.
Okay.
And the opposite poem, like the response, would be color, and I'm walking forward. And so that was symbolic. So it was really nice collaborating with him on that project.
Where do you see yourself in the future? Do you have any future plans, maybe a second book, perhaps?
Oh, definitely. I think once you cross over to the other side, nothing can stop you. I've already started writing the second book, but I'm still focusing on this as an imprint, and we have a couple of projects related to that. And so eventually, when the buzz kind of dies down, I will, publish my second book.
Earlier you mentioned how you use a lot of symbolism in your work. Do you find people see it difficult to understand or comprehend the message you're trying to bring across?
I think it's kind of easy because the feedback that I've gotten, people have interpreted, especially the aspect of spiritual awakening. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think most people have gotten the symbolism.
Nejoud, I'm one of the fans of the way you recite your poetry. Is there a special way that, is there a special type of way that a poet should learn to recite their poetry, or is it freestyle, or each poetry has its own style that I have to learn to say it's in?
Actually, I never intended to recite my poetry, and I wasn't even thinking of publishing a book for that matter. So I never practiced or memorized any of my poems. For me, I wrote the poems and wanted people to read it. But once the poetry becomes more public, people like you to recite things, and that's why I started with the videos. I said, let me take baby steps until I get used to reciting the poems in public. So that's how it came about. There wasn't a style that I learned or intonation. I think it just came naturally with the poem itself.
True. Now, Tori, we've been talking a lot about the videos, but perhaps you want to tell us how we can watch these videos.
Well, the links are on YouTube. So if you Google, this is an imprint.
This is an imprint.
Yes, you'll find the first video where, and then the second video is the visual poem.
The visual
yeah,
poem.
you can just Google Hussein Slash, and you'll find
and then
the
his
link.
work, and then it'll be
one of the videos. You'll find the link.
You being an expert, writing poetry for a while, when you see other poets, how do you evaluate their work? Is there something in particular? Is there a particular outline that you look for, or?
Actually, no. It's a feeling that's conveyed. I feel a successful poem is when the emotion is conveyed, because sometimes you don't really know what the poet was going through at the time, or you don't know the situation behind it, especially if it was written posthumously. Mm-hmm. And so as long as the feeling is conveyed, then you know that you've successfully transmitted that poem to the reader.
Mm-hmm. Nejoud, we spoke about how you are an international poet. I didn't want to specify a single country because this show is for a lot of communities here in Kuwait. I would like to know, with your poetry, if you have you been reaching other communities in Kuwait? What are you doing in Kuwait? Is there activities that people can go and get inspired by people like you, or perhaps listen to poetry?
Well, I've been involved in certain projects. Sirdab Lab I had a stand there and book signing, and I also had a reading. Well, it wasn't actually a reading, like I said, baby steps, but we aired the video at Kuwait Bookstore. And so yeah, people have been in interviews and you know,
Okay.
the nitty-gritty.
And that's very good. Nejoud, we'll take a little break right now and we'll come right back.
Okay.
Hello and welcome back. Here we are with our guest, Nejoud Al-Yagout, and she has been talking to us about her poetry. She's an international poet and she's been doing this for years. Nejoud, I had to ask you, when you write your poetry, is there a target audience that you're aiming at?
Actually, no. I write for anyone who will read it. So, yeah, everyone is welcome to read the poetry.
That's good. Well, we're where are your target audience, I guess, because your poetry had definitely influenced us to read more. But I would also like to ask you something that is kind of personal to me, because I also had, if you can call it a hobby, but I somewhat like to write, keeping in mind if that poetry or whatever I'm writing is going to be turned into a song. That's how I write. I imagine it being a song afterwards. So in terms of your poetry, do you write for a specific outcome in the future, or is it freestyle? Or, you know, we'll shorten the question is, do you write poetry for music or songs?
Well, no, actually, all my poetries are in free verse. I have a couple that rhyme, but I don't write them as songs. Although I am working on a secret project, and I sent a poem to somebody, and they decided to turn it into a song. So it's a coincidence that you asked that question.
Okay, so that song, they're turning one of your poetry that you didn't necessarily write to become a song.
No.
But, do you feel like if someone tells you that I love what you're writing, I would like you to write, I'm a singer, would you be enthusiastic about writing poetry for a song?
Yeah, I've actually had that fantasy before, because when I first started writing poetry in high school, they resembled songs. It was more, you know, like rhythm and rhyme, and, you know, it transcended into something else. And so, yeah, I've always had that fantasy of writing, you know, for a singer who sings in English, yeah. So
that's good. That's
interesting that you asked that.
Yeah.
Okay. And one other thing is, as you know, our world is becoming more technologically advanced, and people are turning more to their phones rather than going to books, the traditional method of just reading novels and books. So how would you say you would target those people who are more interested in the technology?
Right. I took that into consideration, especially since I gave a presentation at the Kuwait English School, and I knew the students might get bored with a typical poetry recital, and so that's where the videos came in handy. I think people, especially in this day and age, like you said, are really interested in technology, you know, social media. So,
and that's how you grabbed my attention, to be honest, because I was on YouTube. And
yes.
You had told me, and I know that she had a book published, but it's almost getting hard to get our hands and like to be able to get these kind of books. Not hard, but maybe we became a little more lazy since you know, we want things on Instagram, on YouTube. But it's a good thing that your videos are on YouTube.
I love books. You know, I mean, even though I love browsing on the internet, who doesn't? But I have to have my books. Yeah.
And now that you are in a place of influence, you have people reading your work, is there a specific message that you want to send forth to your readers or your listeners, your followers?
Sending a message is really, it's quite difficult, but I hope that my poetry is all-encompassing in that it's not exclusive, and that's why when I say I don't have a target audience, I want everyone to be able to read the poems, because I don't adhere to the policy of exclusivity. I want it to be inclusive, and so if there is an underlying message, it's you know, the humanitarian message that we're all interconnected somehow.
Nejoud, when I read a couple of verses in your poetry, I'm not going to pick one, but if I ask you to pick one of these verses and explain it, and maybe perhaps there was a hidden meaning behind it that I didn't understand, or maybe I did. So is there a verse that you can explain? Maybe it means something to you?
Well, yeah, perhaps the poem that that I explain a lot is the first poem, Confusion.com.
Okay.
The first line is, I've upset the caterpillar, for I know not who I am. And it's an allusion to Alice in Wonderland, the scene where the caterpillar is smoking the hookah, and he asks Alice, who are you? And so the poem is about identity crisis, and that's why it's called Confusion.com. The response from a higher level of consciousness is no more Confusion.com, where the ego is, a manifestation of the mind.
I see. I see. One of my favorite, well, I mean, there's a lot of nice ones, but one that caught my attention was the one that you were explaining, and perhaps I took it literally, the walking into the forest and perhaps
berries?
picking the berries and making pie out of them. That's how I understood it. But is there something hidden behind that? Or?
Yeah, again, that's from the same poem.
Of course, yeah.
It's just when you're in a forest, you don't know which way you're going. You're kind of lost, But then you have the berries, which is something sweet, so that even in the darkness, there's that little light. So sometimes, even in the poems in the lower frequency, you'll still find that light shining through, that beacon that guides you.
That's very nice.
I noticed that with your poetry, there's a lot of depth to it. Would you agree with the statement that people can view your poetry and see one thing completely different than what I would see in your poetry?
Definitely, it's open to anyone's perception. But like I said, it's that feeling, that frequency. Do you understand the frequency? And so when I sit with people who've read my poems, I'm really satisfied when that same frequency is conveyed to them, because I know that I've succeeded in transmitting the message, or whatever we could call it, right?
Nejoud, personally, how do the words come out? Where do you get inspired? Is there a particular physical place that you have to be in, or a mental place that you have to be? How do you get inspired to write?
It's something inside, it could be something that I see on the road, somebody walking, and then I feel like writing, or it could be a situation that I'm going through, and again, like I said, it's, that catharsis, that feeling where you need to get it out.
What I'm understanding almost is that it's like meditation, so it doesn't need a specific place. Is that true?
That's a beautiful way of putting it, yeah.
That's amazing.
That's beautiful, actually.
Would you say this is something you can teach a person, or is there a technique that they should follow, or would you say that you're just born with it?
That's a difficult question, but I don't know if you're born with it. I think it's just something inside of you. It's just my way of being creative. Some people can use that creativity within them to paint. I can't paint. I actually got kicked out of art class when I was a teenager. So I just feel it's not something maybe you're born with, but it's something that's inside. We have maybe a purpose or something, and for me, it's poetry.
Nejoud, do you have anything? I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you? I basically went through because I believe the book was also the video. So do you have, we spoke about future plans, do you have anything that you can maybe debut today here for us, a verse that you wrote or something special for the future?
For the new book?
For the upcoming...
Again, like when I write my poems, it's meant to be read, and so I don't really memorize them.
I see.
But I do have a book in the making, and I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to compile it and put it together.
Is there a certain society or a country that you want your poetry to reach?
This is funny, and it's going to be like maybe a shocking answer, but no, definitely not, because I want it to be universal. When I write, I transcend my nationality, and so I want it to be something that anyone can read. Again, I don't adhere to exclusivity, so maybe it's,
No, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, okay.
For all those out there who are planning to, publish their poetry, Is there any advice you could give them?
Yeah, probably the Nike commercial would say that just do it. Really. Just go out there and do it, because it took me a long time. I was really afraid of the reaction, and I felt like I was bearing my soul to people, and I finally caved into the pressure from my family and nearest and dearest, and I said, you know what, so that's why I want to tell anyone who wants to publish a book, just do it.
In your opinion, what was the hardest? I know that it's steps to reach where you want to reach. What was, I don't want to say the hardest, but what was the obstacle that bothered you at the beginning, and then you overcame it and you reached the goal of publishing the book and you were happy about it?
That's a very good question. I think the obstacle was me, or the ego within me, you know. I didn't want exposure. At the time I was, you know, I felt like I would have so much explaining to do, and people would analyze my poetry, and, you know, like we're doing right now. And so I had to reach a certain state, spiritually and mentally, before I was prepared to share my poetry. And I think that's what life does. You know, you reach a point where people tell you, don't do things when you're not ready, but I'm against that. And I'm like, just do it even if you're not ready. Just go for it. If you have something to share, or something that you want to express creatively, just do it. Because I get so excited when I see people paint, or when I see people, you know, do things that are creative, that it's just nice, and you can inspire people.
Yeah, Tori, I just realized that Nejoud here is actually, she is putting something that is really a part of her life and almost personal, and it is completely personal, but deep. And sometimes people want to hide these things because they're not ready, but Nejoud is putting it out there, and it's a big deal. I mean, I, for example, wouldn't be able to do it yet, but maybe I should just do it.
You'd be surprised, really. I think once you do it, that's it. You know, you just have to face your fears, and that's what we were talking about earlier. Once you face them, you can transcend them.
Yes.
You know, when you look at it objectively, and you feel the fear within you, and you don't deny that it's there, and then suddenly something else takes over.
Yeah.
You know, just like when you're writing, something takes over, and then you just keep flowing.
To touch upon what Faisal was saying, when you write, do you feel a sense of vulnerability? Because you're putting everything out there. And is there that fear that how are people going to respond to this?
It was there. But once I published the poetry, once I published the book and I saw the support and the feedback, I felt relieved. It was like, it was something I felt, you know, if I can do this, anybody can, you know, because there was so much fear holding me back. And to be able to have felt it and still to have gone through it, you know, I feel like anybody can do it.
Yeah, perhaps now it's becoming easier for you, but we live in a world where we are kind of confined to follow mainstream and follow certain steps. And I think what you're trying to say is that it is important to be real. And what you said is go with the flow and write anywhere you have to write, because it's not a certain package that you have to follow. Otherwise, it'll come out. And that's what touched me about Nejoud's poetry, is that it was so easy to understand from the very beginning, and it just flowed. Like she made it flow. It flowed to me as far as comprehending it. And I think the big message here is to be yourself, be real, and not particularly follow the mainstream. You can learn from the mainstream. You can go to school and for that sake and understand. But it's nice to be yourself and break from the box, if you will.
I think something that resonates with me after all you've said is that, you know, don't confine yourself to a box. You know, step out, do something different, regardless of what people might think or say.
Absolutely.
You know, so I think that's one of the biggest things that has impacted me.
And I also like what Faisal said about being real and being authentic, because we were discussing this earlier, how a lot of people enter fields that they're not really, they don't have a passion for, but they're doing it commercially, and so you can actually feel that, because this energy is transmitted through your work of art or through your, you know, creative manifestations, and you can feel that lack of authenticity. So that would be a good advice to give to people. Are you doing what resonates within you, as you mentioned? It's really essential.
And what about Tori actually reminded me earlier, because she's got a passion about theater,
Yes.
and I think that's her goal in life in the future. We asked you about the poetry for music, but would poetry, can you write for theater as well?
Oh no, I'm not, definitely not a playwright. You'd have to hand that to other people I know, but not me.
I see, but
Yeah,
is
not
there
a
such
playwright,
thing?
and I don't. People have even asked me about fiction. I think poetry is my realm.
Oh, okay. But I mean, is there such thing as that segment of poets that can write for theater?
Well, Oscar Wilde, he was, he did it all, right?
Yeah.
He was a fiction writer, a playwright, a poet.
And does that is that different? Does it go with a is there? Perhaps we didn't talk much about rhyme. Does that have to be in the school of poetry where it has to rhyme, or
As a playwright?
for plays and for?
Oh, I think it would be different, because it's more dialogues, right? And scenes
Okay,
and
okay.
settings, yeah.
I think Tori's more.
Yeah, more of an expert in that, right? Yeah, but I think, I don't think it would have, that would be like a musical,
Yes.
right? If
Yeah,
it rhymed,
probably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Would you characterize your poetry to a certain genre or style?
Definitely free verse,
Free
I wouldn't label it,
Okay.
because I feel like when I label it, I'm confining myself, and the words don't flow easily.
Nejoud, I'm a fan of Japanese poetry, haiku. You don't really have to elaborate specifically on it, but does it relate to any of the verses that you wrote? You said free verse, I understand.
Yeah.
But do you like it, let's say?
Yeah, haikus are beautiful. I don't write them personally because I feel like when I write rhythm and rhyme and haiku, the words, again, don't flow as easily from within me. So I just make up my own rules and write whatever I do, yeah.
Haiku
But it's a work of art.
Yeah, it's very simple. What I like about it is the simplicity, but it started because of a communication of like loved ones between two rivers, and that's how it started in Japan. So it started with a bottle. That's the message in the bottle. So they would write. That's why it was very simple, easy, and like a 3-verse it had to be, and it was like a message thing. So almost like I'm here, I'm enjoying the blossoms, and this is for you. And then you send the message in the bottle, and they reply. So
It's
I think I
beautiful,
like the
yes.
simplicity.
Yes,
of it.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And do you also have? Would you say? I know we spoke a lot about free verse, but would you say the advice that you would give someone who would want to start with poetry, to start with simplicity and free verse, or do you have?
It depends because, for example, I was looking at some poems by some students had sent me some poems, and each one had their own style. Some people were comfortable with sonnets, believe it or not, which are quite difficult. I saw a couple of haikus, some were free verse. So again, it depends on the writer.
Yes, yes.
From personal experience, when I was in high school and we were in a literature class, our teacher always told us that there was a certain format we had to follow. What would you say to students who have been taught this all their life? There's a format you have to follow.
Well, in school, follow the format so you can get the A, but not in life.
Yeah. And then
You know,
learn
there's
how
a
to break it at the end.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a total difference between what we learn in school and what we learn in life, per se. So I would say if that's going to get you the A, then do it, but
Right.
not in real life.
True. Nejoud, there's so much to talk about. There's just, I don't think 15 or 20 minutes is enough. I hope that you would come and visit us when you publish your second book so
I'd
we can
be
have more to
honored,
talk
yes.
about.
Definitely.
But unfortunately, we have to go right now, and we're so happy that you were
Thank
here
you
with
so
us.
much, Faisal,
You,
Tori.
Really great.
You influenced us for sure,
Oh.
and we hope maybe in the future we can show you some poetry that me and Tori can write.
Oh,
I'm
Who
inspired
knows?
to start writing. Yeah.
Oh, excellent.
Thank you so much, and we'll
Thank
be
you.
right
Thank
back
you.
after this break. Well, that was our show for today. We really hope that you enjoyed it, and see you next time with a new show.
I hope you've had as much fun as we did. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Just as you take my hand, just as you write my number down, just as the drinks arrive.